Hey, my name is Joe,
And I'm Mary Beth.
and this is the best of Gen X.
We are in our 40s.
And we're siblings,
We'll talk about adulting in a world so different from the one we grew up in,
so excuse us while we save a generation.
one episode at a time.
Let's go.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Mary Beth.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I feel like we just did this.
I know.
We recorded an episode yesterday.
You were supposed to tell.
Well,
I'm just joking.
on October 27th is when it's going to drop. It's our Halloween Spooktacular. We had a special guest on with us, and that person is leaving for out of town, so we went ahead and recorded that yesterday.
Word.
Here we are again.
It was quite spooky. Yeah. What you been up to?
Not much. Getting ready for my trip, my business trip that we talked about.
Oh, this is the ATL Georgia trip.
Yes.
You a little anxious about it?
Yeah. Just all the socializing. It's not the travel so much as the socializing part, because it's, they send you the agenda and it goes from like 8:30 in the morning to 5 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have to break into small groups and go out to dinner together.
Lame. Yeah, well, I think you said Josh was going, right? So at least
My beautiful husband is coming with me.
yeah, so you have that companionship. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be comforting for you. I get it though, because we've talked about this. I work from home, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes you're like, man. Well, I maybe more me than you, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, human interaction would be good. My company's a lot of Zoom, so we're on video a lot, but it is good because every 3 months I have to go to like corporate office to do like quarterly leadership meetings. So that's when they invite all the VPs and directors, and it's really just 5 or 6 hours of the CEO talking about the vision and strategy for the next year, and the finance people saying, hey, here's where we're at. And then, legal teams get up there and do their thing. So it's just really just an informational, if you're not presenting, an informational kind of session. And it's good just to have FaceTime. So I kind of enjoy
So they say.
Yeah. Well, I kind of enjoy that because they pay for me to go there. They pay for my meals. They pay for my hotel. And all I have to do is really just listen and just show face. So I get a kick out of being able to just kind of get away from my house for a few days. It's really, 2 or 3 days, and that's it. So I kind of enjoy that myself. And it's a nice break from just the monotony of what I'm doing here, because it can get quiet if I'm not doing any coaching or anything like that. But yeah, so how do you feel about, because I know you worked from home for a while too, like, what do you think about work from home? Do you prefer that versus like going in?
I do now. I can't believe that I was a high school teacher for 16 and a half years. I can't believe day in and day out I was on. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't change anything, wouldn't trade it for anything. I had wonderful experiences, but it'll be 8 years in January that I switched careers and started working from home. And I was always a homebody, but this job sort of, I don't know, broke me. Like, it made me just reclusive. And I think there are other reasons for that I won't get into, but it's not that I never go out. It's just I've become so used to the coziness and the quiet that I easily overstimulated.
Yeah, I get that. Because I've been doing it for probably pretty much since 2016. Mm-hmm. And it was a little off and on before that, but I too can get like that where I get that comfort level. That's what I try to stay out of if it goes on too long. But my issue has always been, since I started working from home close to 10 years ago, I'm horrible about taking days off. Because in my mind, I'm like, I'm in my basketball shorts and my socks all day in my house. So I forget that I need to take days off. Because every day to me feels like a day off with meetings in between.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I'll have like 170 PTO hours banked, and it's like September, and I'm like, crap, I need to take some.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because when I first started this job, it felt like in some ways, I felt like a stay-at-home mom, even though I was working 8 hours a day.
Bringing in a check.
It just feels, and it, in comparison to what I was doing intellectually, it's not as challenging,
Sure.
obviously. But, so yeah, it took some adjustment for me also to get out of that salary, like teaching mentality. I remember my supervisor in my first week, she pinged me on like instant message or whatever. And she's like, you need to clock out. And I was like, but I'm not finished. And she goes, no, clock out. Have a good weekend. And that was just a completely new frame of mind for me. I had to really get used to that. Clock out and look away, walk away, because that's just not what teachers do.
Right.
And it's certainly not what I did.
Right.
I would say that it took longer, much longer, and still to this day for my family to, I guess, accept that I wasn't a stay-at-home mom, even though every day looked to them like I was just like,
just laying around.
Right.
Yeah. No, I get that. Well, I mean, the cool thing about work from home is you can just have your computer on your lap in the bed.
Yes.
And there's really nobody to judge that because you're still getting work done.
My bed is one of those that inclines and you can raise your legs up and just kind of get in that zero gravity position with my lap desk and my dog's cozy next to me. And it's even worse in the winter when I'm just so cozy. So I very much dig that part of it. The coziness of it, the quiet is comforting to me. And feeling like I'm free.
Yeah.
I feel free.
I understand that. So yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I feel like I need to get better. And here recently I've gotten a little bit better about making a solid effort to say, you know what, I need a mental health day, or I'm experiencing some burnout with what we've been doing because like we have a really tough deadline that we've been trying to meet, and we worked 6 to 8 weeks leading up to that. So I'm like, I'm gonna take a Thursday and Friday off, or a Friday off. So I'm getting a little bit better about that.
Yeah, burnout's very real.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a week off here probably in the next week or two just to kind of.
Me too.
But the issue again is I'm home all day. So if I want to spend 20 or 30 minutes to go to a store or go do laundry after in between meetings, I just do it, and I don't feel like I need to take a day to do that.
Right. So
that's where I struggle because only I think 40 hours carries over or whatever it is. So I just have to, because I know I'm going to take a couple for Christmas, obviously. So, but yeah, I was just curious kind of like how you viewed your working environment. I think I'm kind of the same, which sounds like we're pretty similar in that. But, in recent years, I feel like how we work has changed a lot. When I say we, I just mean like the collective society, how we work has really changed. And, many people now work from home like us, and opinions about where we should work are kind of divided. Even though lots of people like working remotely, there's a growing idea that going back to the office could have some benefits that we haven't really paid enough attention to. There's something special about that shared energy bouncing off the walls of an office, and I experienced that at my first company out of college.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that quite a bit. The camaraderie, the back and forth, an in-person work environment. I feel like it opens doors to like a world of just collaboration that's hard to sort of like replicate virtually.
Yeah.
And it kind of, the in-person side in an actual office setting really simplifies your communication, and it sort of promotes teamwork a little bit more, I think, and then allows for more immediate problem solving. So I think it can make you a little more efficient in that respect. And I think also, too, working in the office aids in sort of maintaining that clear separation between your work and personal life.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so and so it kind of gives you that.
It's not easy for everyone.
Yeah, so it kind of gives you that enhanced focus on that piece, but. I know you and I have talked a lot on this podcast about, we're Gen Xers, so we're really into, film and TV and things of that nature. So as it relates to, your working environment or your setting where you work, or whether it's flexible or whether it's hybrid or whether it's remote only, when you think about that from like just a film or TV perspective, at least in the United States, there really wasn't a show, because we're into shows and we always quote shows. There really wasn't a show when we thought about it that captured the day-to-day lives of office employees.
Right. Until
someone really learned of, back in 2001, there was this British sitcom with this very theme. And I don't think a lot of people know about it still.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't even really heard about it until probably within the last few years. So I didn't even know it existed, but it literally started, it was a British version of the show The Office.
Yes.
And it started, I think the first show aired on July of 2001, so before September 11th, if you can think about that.
Yeah.
So this British sitcom of The Office about office employees exists. And so as such, you and I are going to be examining the American version of the show, The Office, as an adaptation, walking a fine line between the much accursed faithfulness to the spirit of the original and the attempt to breathe new life into a series that came to an end across the pond.
We're finally here.
We are finally here.
Remember, before we started this podcast, we did a test run where we just recorded ourselves and we were testing like sound quality and
we
all
did
that
the trivia
stuff.
game.
And we had the Office trivia game, and we just asked each other questions from the cards. And just recorded ourselves
so fun.
And did nothing with it. We still, I still have that.
Yeah,
on.
it was literally just to test the technology that we were using. And it's like we had some adult beverages.
Yeah, and we always knew that we would be covering this show, and we thought now was the perfect time because we've got today's episode, and then we have another one in mid-October, and then the last Sunday in October will be the Halloween Spooktacular with the special guest. After that, man,
It's on.
it's holidays
It's on.
all the way to the end.
It's Skeezin's greetings. But yeah, we constantly find ourselves, even within different episodes and different topics, like referencing The Office or making a quote about the show. So yeah, it was time.
We very much have a if you know kind of back and forth.
Exactly.
When it comes to The Office, especially.
Yeah, and there's so much to cover in that show. I mean, just so much.
There is a lot, and so a two-parter is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
I was going to mention, if we have any listeners who are fans of Big Bang Theory, as we are, you would know one of the creators of the British Office is the brilliant and funny Dave that Amy dates while she's broken up with Sheldon. He's the tall British guy.
Steve Merchant.
Who's so great. I mean, before I
amazing.
realized that was him, I always loved that character. And I thought, if Sheldon weren't Sheldon, I would have liked to see them together because he was a great character.
Sure.
But that is the guy who,
Stephen Merchant.
one of the contributors to it.
Yeah, and Randy Gervais.
Ricky.
Or I'm sorry, Ricky. I said
Ricky
Randy.
Gervais,
Good
who
grief.
I love.
Yeah, Ricky Gervais obviously meant Ricky. So it was an older show that made its way over here to the United States. I'm so glad it did. I'm sure
I am too.
I'm sure
Thank you, Greg Daniels.
millions of people. Oh, we're gonna get there. But like you said, great call. I mean, it warrants a two-parter. So what we're gonna do is in today's episode, we are gonna go pre-Michael Scott departing the show.
Yeah, I call it the Michael Scott era.
The Michael Scott era.
We're looking at seasons 1 through 7.
Even better way to say it. So, yeah, good call. So you just want to get right into it?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's just talk a little bit about, for people that don't know, the origin story of The Office. Just like me, I'm sure you're pretty well-versed because you've already mentioned Greg Daniels. Really, again, started out with Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant putting this British version together, and it was really only like 14 episodes. I think it was technically 2 seasons, but it literally was 14 episodes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and so it was pretty much set up character-wise kind of the same, where they had, the similar characters. We're going to get into the character overviews, but similar type of characters, similar type of vibe, similar type of comedy and humor, and it had the single-camera action versus what we were always used to with the multi-camera stuff. But what happened is, and I'm sure you know this, because there's some really good Office podcasts out there that we can plug, but one of the ones that I really liked was talking about how Ben Silverman, who was the creator of the U.S. version, so Ben Silverman gets wind of this British version that Ricky and Steve had put together, and Ben was in the industry and thought, you know what, I'm going to bring that to the United States. I'm going to bring that to America, but it was a tough road. So Ben is networking with people in the industry that he knows. He's trying to plug the concept. He actually goes to the UK and has, lunch with Ricky Gervais, and he's basically plugging his idea to make it an American version. I think Ricky really loved the idea, and Steve as well, but Ben had to really sell it in the U.S. It wasn't like an easy sell. In fact, what I found out was at the very last minute, the only place that was even willing to to talk to them about this was NBC. Everybody else, Ben Silverman says, told him no.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because there's a real hesitation anytime anyone in arts and entertainment, anytime you want to try to recreate magic, you can't.
exactly. And what we were used to at that time was, I think the biggest show then was like Will and Grace. Again, audience. I can't remember if they had a live audience or laugh track, but it's, it was either or.
The mockumentary style
Exactly. It didn't exist.
Wasn't a thing yet.
So you had Will and Grace, which had an audience or a laugh track. You had multi-camera, and you had Friends, which was huge and still is really. You had Baywatch, had stuff like that. So anyway, Ben Silverman is really trying to pitch this hard. NBC is the only place that takes it. And the only reason NBC takes it, if you're not aware, is one of his buddies, I can't remember his name, Kenny or Keith. It was an industry buddy of his that had just started his leadership role at NBC. So he was like head of whatever Ben was, the area Ben was trying to pitch. And so luckily for all of us, his buddy goes to NBC and has the authority to accept this type. And Ben doesn't even tell him until later on that, he accepted to buy this pitch, but he didn't know he was our last resort. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just a really cool sort of journey to how they got to even bring it over here and make it a reality for everybody. So that's kind of the start of that. But once they had the okay to do that from NBC, then it became, like you said, who's going to run the show? It's like the showrunner is kind of like the lead of the show, kind of like coordinates everything. And, as I understood, they had a few people in mind, but, the person that they really honed in on was Greg Daniels for great reason.
Yes.
If nobody is aware of Greg Daniels, he is a freaking just genius.
He is a genius.
He was an SNL writer back in the good days of SNL. He was kind of the brainchild around King of the Hill. I think he was a showrunner for King of the Hill. Now, while that's animated, it was still very popular. So yeah, he was, and he eventually did Parks and Rec, which we'll probably get into at some point. But Greg Daniels was an industry genius, titan of industry in what he was doing. He was very well respected. And once they started talking to Greg Daniels, I think they had like a kind of like a dinner interview with him about, hey, what's your vision? Like Steve Merchant and Ricky were like, what's your vision of the show? Or what do you think the show is really about? And he said something that none of the other showrunner interviewees said. He said, I think it's a love story.
Yes.
And nobody else was thinking that way.
Yeah.
So they were like, that's our dude. Like, that's our guy.
Awesome. I had forgotten that because I know a lot of our information, our background knowledge of it probably comes from Brian Baumgartner's podcast.
The oral history.
The oral history of The Office. Check it out if you haven't. It's
amazing.
Amazing. It has so many good interviews.
Yep.
And you just learn a lot.
Yeah.
And so I had forgotten about that origin story, that part of it. But it is a love story, very much a love story. And I love that that's how they centered it. And one of the points I was going to make later has to do with Jim and Pam being the foundation that keeps this world rooted in reality, in a way. So anyway.
Yeah, I love hearing about people that are way ahead of, like, their brain works way ahead of anybody else's. Like he kind of like changed TV, but he saw that years, if this makes sense, he saw the future of what it needed to be.
Yes.
And he was the reason that it shifted.
Yes.
Because of the way he thought differently. You know what I mean? He thought so differently than anybody else. I think that's so fascinating when people are way ahead of others in terms of what they think will work, how they think that, TV in itself is going to change. Like, how do you even see that?
Well, you know what? I used to have these. I was a videographer. I mean, as a teacher, one of the classes I taught was called mass media, but we did video production. And, of course, I was a theater director for years as well, and I taught English. So my life was storytelling, whether it was the written word or the live performance on stage or visual storytelling. And I did a little bit of work on the side. I do a wedding here and there just for extra money. And I had on my business card, I had a quote by Jonathan Swift. Vision is the art of seeing what's invisible to others. So, and that quote always resonated with me because when you are trying to express and articulate a vision that you have that no one else can see, imagine, or understand, and it's your job to not just articulate it, but make them feel it, make them see it as clearly as you do, And that was one of the things that I enjoyed most, especially when it came to theatrical productions and the videos that we did that were just so fun and creative. And they were, the students were newbies and they were learning the technology side of it, but the storytelling was always the most fun to sort of hash out together. And I mean, we got in some really heated back and forth sometimes when you create something, that's your baby, and you don't want it to be messed with. And so when competing visions, sort of get in the way of it, well, it doesn't get in the way, but it's part of the process. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my point is, and not to brag, but I completely understand what that's like. I know what it feels like. For me, it was always a physical sensation. I felt as soon as it clicked, I would sort of circle the airport of an idea. And I knew that if I just gave it time, the light bulb would finally go on. I'd land that plane when everything would come into focus. And
let it breathe.
And I'd have that vision.
That's super cool.
And, you could feel it immediately, like, boom, I know it. I know what this needs to look like, feel like, sound like. And it's something I very much miss. And so I guess that's why I love listening to these podcasts, because you get to hear these people have such fascinating conversations about all the thoughts and conversations that go into the decisions that you don't even think about. You're just the viewer taking in this story and loving it, but maybe you don't even know why it works. Yep. And so to hear those conversations is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I totally respect people that can be that visionary type. Because if it was me and somebody said, "What's your take on the British version?" Not in a million years would I thought of Love Story.
You would think this central character would be Michael Scott. It's all about Michael Scott.
Exactly. So I love that story.
The fact that he made that the central core of it is one of the reasons we know that you can't, like, the hottest show in the world, it's still on a great run, and your star leaves, and is it possible that it got better? I mean,
some say yes, some say no.
Right. I mean, that's to each his own, but my point is, for a show to be at its peak and then your star leaves and it still survived because it wasn't all about Michael Scott.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And I think that's what Greg saw.
Yes.
He's like, if we have these type of storylines that have substance, it can hold its own without this dude. Now, this dude's great.
Oh, absolutely.
But, yes.
Exceptional.
I totally agree with you. So thank you, Ben Silverman, for realizing that there was an opportunity for us to enjoy that type of show. And thank you for Greg Daniels for taking that on and having that vision. So I should say Greg Daniels was the showrunner from season 1 through 5. And then, like I mentioned earlier, he had to leave to do Parks and Rec. And then he came back in season 9 to be the showrunner. So Greg Daniels was very heavily involved.
It's no wonder the final season worked so well.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you again, Greg.
To tie in things.
Yeah. Thank you again, Greg. So I think it's important how we just go over the cast. Like, let's just give an overview of what we're working with on this show and kind of who we came to love and know so much. Obviously you have Stanley Hudson. So, feel free to chime in. So
I must chime in because I always imitate Stanley at home.
What do you do?
Well, if my daughter or if my husband or if the dogs, if anything's agitating me, I'll just go, "Leave me alone, damn it."
I love that part. That's the stuttering episode. Did I stutter?
Leave me alone, damn it. It's fun.
Yeah. He goes, we sit close.
Now I got 2 toasters.
Yeah. So played by Leslie David Baker, who I thought did a great job. Now, he didn't have a ton of lines in each episode.
This is an ensemble.
Everybody had a role to play.
Everybody had an important role, even if they were just in the background.
Right.
You try to pick a favorite character or you try to imagine a different person being cast, and you just can't. Everyone was so perfect for what they were there to do.
Totally agree. And you probably heard this in a recent Office Ladies podcast, but he apparently the whole puzzle, his little puzzle stuff that he does. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like, he was like, I think Greg and the team were like figure out something that you could be doing in the background to make it look like you're there, but you're not really there. And he's like, yeah, there's a puzzle book. He goes, oh, it was already filled out, but I'm sitting here pretending like it's not. And I thought that was brilliant.
And that became his
It
thing.
became his thing. He goes into every meeting with his little puzzle and his pencil.
Crossword puzzles.
And he doesn't pay attention to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got Stanley Hudson. You have Kevin Malone, played by Brian Baumgartner, who, as we mentioned earlier, was kind of the brainchild around the oral history of The Office podcast. He's also now doing a podcast separately called Off the Beat. But, I would really take a listen to him because he's really good. And it's weird to hear him speak like a normal person.
Like a normal person, yeah.
When he's not talking like Kevin Malone. So Kevin Malone, the really bad accountant. You have Meredith Palmer, who was played by Kate Flannery. So she was the redhead that sat in front of Creed. You have Angela Martin, who was played by Angela Kinsey. She is the petite blonde accountant that works with Kevin Malone.
Who is, according to Pam, tightly wound.
Exactly. But she's also part of the Office Ladies podcast with Jenna
The
Fisher.
Office Ladies is a must listen, and they're almost finished. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's been years since they started that, but they went episode by episode, and Mary Beth and I really like it. So you should check it out. But then also in accounting, you have Oscar Martinez, played by Oscar Nunez. So that's kind of like your back corner of the three accountants. It's a really cool kind of dynamic between those three. They're also very different, but they play off each other so well. Then you have Phyllis Vance / Phyllis Lappin. She ends up getting married, but she's played by Phyllis Smith. Do you know about Phyllis Smith?
I do. She was part of casting.
Yep.
And she was doing so much reading for all these auditions. And ultimately, they asked her to read for the character Phyllis because she had, she was reading. If a Pam came into audition, she's reading the other character. And so she just became so familiar with all the characters and became so good at that back and forth and added something very different. Mm-hmm. And so she was not in the acting part of the industry, but ultimately through her casting of The Office became a part of the cast of The Office.
Yeah, they created that role for her, and guess who made that decision?
Right.
Greg Daniels.
Yeah, very smart.
Yeah, so that was a good ad there. And then Roy Anderson, he didn't have as much of a role in the later seasons, but in the beginning he was Pam's fiance, played by David Denman. Well, I think David Denman's pretty good.
Yeah.
Jan Levinson, or Jan Levinson Gould, was played by Melora Hardin. Also, I think she was phenomenal.
She's
amazing.
Yeah. I don't even know how she maintained her professional decorum.
Yep. Yeah, she definitely played
in all the scenes with Steve Carell.
Yeah, so Melora's role as Jan kind of started off as Michael's boss, and then became his partner,
his lover.
Great character. And then Kelly Kapoor is played by Mindy Kaling, and she's more of like the customer service type. She was also a writer, which we're going to talk about that when we talk about a few other characters. But I thought it was really neat how you had a few writers that were actually star players in the show. And then Toby Flenderson, played by Paul Lieberstein, also a writer. And
one of the main writers, actually.
One of the main writers. And he is Greg Daniels' brother-in-law.
Yeah, there's some
familial connections there.
Right.
Yeah, so Paul Lieberstein, his sister is married to Greg Daniels, the showrunner.
His brother was married to Angela Kinsey.
His brother was also part of that, was it the writing? I can't remember his Halstead, or not Halstead, but...
I think he was part of the producing.
Yeah, Warren Lieberstein and Halstead Sullivan were two of the main producers, I think. But yeah.
I did see a cast interview with a big audience one time where they... it seems like with an ensemble like that, they always ask, who's the funniest in real life? And they all, without hesitation, pointed to Paul.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was one of those things, I think, be careful what no good deed goes unpunished. I think they put him in a scene or put him in one episode. He was just supposed to be like a one-off kind of thing. But he became like a staple in The Office and the foil to Michael Scott.
Oh, yeah. I think that was brilliant.
Hated for no reason at all.
But how he delivered his lines so dry, and I just thought that was
so
awesome.
Perfect.
But it's interesting that we heard that if they were if it was Mindy Kaling or Paul Lieberstein, we'll talk about. Well, let's just get into B.J. Novak. B.J. Novak, Ryan Howard was played by B.J. Novak, and he was one of the head writers as well. You'll notice in a lot of the episodes where they might have a line or two, but then you won't see him for half of the episode or more than half of the episode. It's because they had to do some writing for other upcoming episodes. So they couldn't be there all the time like a Jim or a Pam or a Dwight. So yeah, if you ever notice in the episodes where they kind of go missing for a little bit, that's kind of that's why. Creed Bratton, played by Creed Bratton.
Right.
Again, kind of like Stanley, like didn't have a lot of lines, but he kind of just had that little bit about him that made it fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Daryl Philbin, played by Craig Robinson. I love Craig Robinson. I'm
love
a huge
that dude.
Craig Robinson fan. Yeah, I love Craig Robinson.
He's such a natural.
Yeah, so he's the guy that plays on Hot Tub Time Machine. He's kind of the head of the warehouse in the series of The Office. He plays on some other stuff, but he's amazing. He's a great musician, good singer, just a great actor, overall. So I thought his part was awesome. And then, we talked about BJ Novak. Erin Hannon was played by Ellie Kemper. So she came in like a couple seasons before Michael left. She's also great. Gabe Lewis was played by Zach Woods, who I think in the industry, he's very well respected.
He is, and he's one of the funniest people.
And he was in Silicon Valley. If you have HBO Max, he's great. He's a real tall, bird-looking dude with dark hair. Were you going to say something else about him?
I was just going to say that he's great in The Office, but honestly, his character didn't give him a chance to shine comedically because this guy is hysterical. If you see him in an interview, listen to him. He's so genuine and so funny, self-deprecating, just incredibly talented.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously, she joins the series, I think, in season 5. And then I think, obviously, when Michael leaves in season 7, she's part of that, exit of the show. But Amy Ryan played Holly Flax, Michael's eventual life partner, wife. And, of course, we have Jim and Pam. Jim played by the great John Krasinski, who has had just a hit after hit.
Superstar.
After hit. Great movies, great shows. He's amazing. Married to Emily Blunt in real life. And then you have Jenna Fisher, who plays Pam, who's also, head of the Office Ladies podcast with Angela Kinsey.
So good. And
what a cast.
We can't forget Dwight.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Gosh, this is like another Mario Lopez, AC Slater.
It's haunting you.
The reason I forgot that is because I have a whole separate section that we're going to talk about.
Right.
Dwight K. Schrute, the legend.
I have long since believed that every person needs a Dwight in their life.
Yeah.
I feel like every home needs to come equipped with a Dwight.
I'm so glad you caught that. Dwight K. How dare me? Dwight K. Schrute, played by the great Rainn Wilson.
Who's got his own podcast. I know that
it's
Soul Pancake.
Yeah, Soul Pancake.
Soul Food is his current podcast, but he started Soul Pancake. He's on a real an interesting journey. I'd say mind, body, spirit. Just talking to all kinds of different experts and people in different fields, pursuing happiness and what that looks like in different people's lives. So he's an interesting person to listen to. So I would check out his podcast too. He has a lot of interesting interviews in that. Yeah,
I think he has something on HBO Max now. It's about the happiness thing. Where he travels to Iceland and he's trying to figure out the places that people are the most happy.
Yeah,
he's just a neat person.
He is a neat person.
That's kind of the best way I can think to describe him. He's neat. He's one of those dudes that I would just love just sitting in a room with like while he's playing a guitar, just listening to him. Just,
I know.
Like hit record.
There wasn't nearly enough Dwight music in The Office.
Right. Like just hit record and see what we get.
Yeah.
Just listen to him just go. But yeah, thank you for catching that. He's amazing. I really think he helped stand the show up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it is a love story, but honestly, I would include Dwight as part of that.
The show is nothing without that character.
Well, exactly. Like, it's not just the love between Jim and Pam. It becomes the love between the three of them, and then, of course, Dwight and Angela. But the anchors of that show are Jim, Pam, and Dwight.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the character breakdown. You have anything else on the characters, Mary Beth?
I think we should just go ahead because we're 35 minutes in or so. I think we need to go ahead and touch on something that I've heard way too many people say.
Okay.
People who aren't fans of The Office, people who quote unquote don't get it. I have to say, if any of you, first of all, haven't seen it before, this is going to be full of spoilers. And although it's an old show and you don't deserve a spoil warning, I would never want to ruin, with this show, I would never want to ruin a first-timer's experience. However, we can't talk about it thoroughly without giving spoilers,
Exactly.
so just be aware of that.
Yeah.
But I've heard far too many people say, you know what, I tried, I couldn't get past a couple episodes. It's just too cringe.
Shame.
Just too
Shame.
cringe. And I would always encourage people, you've got to stick it out. It is going to be cringe. That's his character. But just give it a chance. I don't think people who give up on the show early could ever imagine where it ends up
Exactly.
and how you feel about these people.
It's so different from the start.
I mean, so that's what makes me sad when someone walks away from it. Like, I tried, I don't get it.
I was that person.
But I think so many people. It's just there are some who stick it out and some who can't.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about our own coming to this.
Our journey.
Yeah. But as speaking of cringe, are you ready to talk about some of the cringiest Michael moments?
We have to, because, I mean, that's just like, that floods the interwebs.
I tell you what.
I'm really anxious to hear yours, by the way.
I wonder if we have a lot of the same, but it's hard to narrow down to
It
3.
is. I had 6, and I'm like, I could have put 10 more.
I could have.
Easily.
Well, dude, there is a cringy Michael moment maybe 8 times an episode.
Exactly.
So I tried to pick the best ones, the ones that make me so uncomfortable I almost can't watch.
Yeah. Ladies first.
Okay. Well, first of all, and I think this is probably the most popular. Should I go 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3?
I would like you to go 3, 2, 1.
Okay. So, I take that back then. I'll start with number 3. Okay. So in the episode, The Fire, when Ryan started the fire. They're playing this game, like, would you rather, or something like that.
Yep.
And Michael blurts out. Now, Michael has this strange obsession with Ryan, the temp.
Yeah, he wants to be his best friend so badly.
He wants to be liked by him, and he thinks he's so handsome. He just wants to be
Hottest guy in the office.
Hottest guy in the office. So during this game, Michael blurts out that he would, like, who would you rather have sex with? And Michael goes, I would have sex with Ryan. And then it just got crickets. And then you see the look on his face when he realizes he said that out loud.
Whoops.
And his character's not even gay.
That is definitely not one that I thought you would have picked.
Well, I think because in preparation for this, I kind of had to do a quick rewatch binge, and it was a moment that I had forgotten about, and it was so funny. So I wasn't just looking for cringe, but cringe funny.
Okay. So what's 2?
So 2. Okay, this one always gets me. This one doesn't make me laugh. This one actually makes me want to look away. But Todd Packer's telling a joke, and it's early on, and Michael doesn't want to offend Phyllis because Packer, in telling this joke, points to Phyllis and says, she wasn't good looking. She was kind of like this.
I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah, so Michael kneels down next to her and puts his arms around her, and he's like, you are gorgeous. And she's like, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to report you to HR. And he goes, you know what I am worried about? I can't even say it.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about is getting a boner.
Getting a boner. It's awful.
But but his facial expression was perfect.
I know.
Like you said, the cringy part is like what makes it work. Like it's just what makes it work.
Yeah, and the best thing about Steve Carell in those moments is that you can see it. You can see the realization on his face, the moment where he says to himself inside, you can hear his inner dialogue after he says such things. Mm-hmm. And you can see it on his face where he's like, how do I get out of this?
Right.
How do I get out of this?
And really quick, Todd Packer because we didn't mention him in the character overview. He is a traveling salesman for The Office, and he's played by Dave Koechner, who is in The Anchorman. He's in all those, big funny movies.
His whole character is cringe.
So, yeah, agreed.
But my top one, and I think millions of fans the world over would agree, and I can't even watch the episode because the entire episode is cringe. It's Scott's Tots. Everyone would agree with me. Cringiest Michael Scott thing ever. How could you do it? How could you do that, Michael? How could you promise to pay for the college educations of how many kids? Like 10 kids or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Scott's Tots. I can't even watch it. I usually skip it.
Yeah, so that's where he promises them scholarships and like when they were in 3rd grade
When they were
whatever.
3rd or 4th grade, and then he realizes that time is up And they're
He's not a
seniors.
millionaire.
They're seniors, and he's not a millionaire like he thought he would be. And he has to go to the school, and they do this presentation. They do this little dance for him, and he's sitting there like, how do I tell these kids I don't have their college education? It's the worst.
So I know that one's a popular one, and I figured that might be on your list, but I actually disagree.
You disagree about that episode being cringy?
I don't. Well, I mean, there's elements that are cringy, but I feel like it's not so much cringy as just he's just a shithead for it. Like I feel like it's just bad. I don't.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like
cringy
Pam's,
to me is like I can't watch. But that episode just pisses me off. Like why would you do that?
It's like what Pam says, Michael. This is a terrible thing that you've done.
Exactly.
Terrible. So there is that, but it's just the cringiness of it, the embarrassment. Like I die from secondhand embarrassment.
It's popular on the internet as like the most cringe moment, but to me, I'm just like playing devil's advocate. I'm like, I just think it's just being a bad person in that in that regard. So yeah, that's a good list.
I could keep going, but I want to hear yours.
Okay, now I have 6, so I'll give my top 3, and then I'll just rapid fire.
I could have gone further, Joseph.
Okay. Well, I think it was really cringy, so I'll say my number 3 is The Secret. When Mike tells, the episode is called The Secret.
Oh,
when Mike tells the secret of Jim's crush on Pam, Michael's in his office staring at Jim, and he starts messing his hair up to look like Jim, and he takes him to Hooters for lunch because Jim knows if he keeps that man at the office, that secret is getting out. So Jim goes to the Hooters with him, and Michael says, "I'll have a chicken breast sandwich. Hold the chicken breast, or hold the
chicken.
Yeah, hold the chicken." And
is that really what you want?
That's part of the cringe, but just the way Michael
he can't take it.
He's so immature, and it's like he has to fix his hair like
well,
Jim.
Just knowing a secret, and this is a common thread about his character early on, especially. He grows up quite a bit, but like just having a secret makes him feel important.
Exactly, he loves that. Yeah,
which is so childish.
Yeah, he hates not being in the know about stuff. So that was my third. My second was. You're probably going to be surprised at this one because it was just a real short moment. Mm-hmm. But I hate this moment every time I watch this show. His reaction to Jim announcing the birth of their baby at the hospital drives me up the wall.
Why? I'm trying to...
Because Jim walks out. Everybody's kind of sitting down, and Michael feels like he has to be the center of it with Jim. So he's standing by Jim, and Jim announces that the baby and mom are fine, and everybody jumps up to give Jim a hug, and Michael goes, "Whoa!" and he gets in front of Jim like it's his deal. And gives them a hug, like he steals the hug.
Right.
I can't stand that moment. It drives me. Every time I watch that, I get mad. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of, he does the same thing with Phyllis's wedding.
That's my number 1.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
That's my number 1.
Oh my
Phyllis's
God.
wedding is the most cringy. Like the entire episode, he is cringy.
That for me was between that and Scott's Tots, but he's terrible.
But it's a similar vibe where he feels like it's his.
It's all about him.
It's not your time, dude. She's getting married. It's like he has to roll her dad down the aisle in his wheelchair, and he's pissed off about that because somebody stole his shine. But it's not your shine.
Because her elderly father
decides to stand up
halfway through, which is a beautiful moment.
And he drags the damn wheelchair and gets pissed. And not only that,
stands up at the altar.
Not only does he say that it's, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Mr. whatever, Phyllis and Bob Vance," but he does it too early. But then to make it worse, he does it again. Can you imagine being in a groomsmen group and stepping one step ahead of everybody and saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, introducing." He does that. I want to barf.
Unforgivable things he does.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then when he feels like it was too early, then the preacher starts talking again. And he does it again. It's like you already know that was stupid. And then he does the toast. And Bob has to finally be like, "Dude, they
have to kick him out."
Yeah, they have to kick him out. And then he starts kicking and screaming like a petulant child. I can't, dude. That's my number 1.
His tantrums are embarrassing.
Yeah, but I have 3 more.
Okay.
We'll just call these honorable mentions.
Okay.
Michael's proposing to Carol, his realtor in Diwali.
That was a runner-up for me.
They were only on date 3 or 4. And he makes her come there in a cheerleading outfit because he basically makes her feel like it's a Halloween, like a costume party.
She said, "You said this was a costume party," which is probably exactly what he told her.
100%.
It's because he doesn't understand the culture.
Yeah.
It's a costume to him because he doesn't.
It's like this Hindu celebration called Diwali, and everybody's wearing these saris and these Indian dresses and stuff. And
that to him is a costume. He's such an idiot.
Yeah, and he was wearing the little fake Michael on his on his shoulder, that little fake puppet thing.
And not embarrassed.
Yeah, but he gets all like sentimental because he's listening to Kelly Kapoor's parents talk about their relationship and how they started. And he's like, you know what? Screw it. He gets on the microphone. He tries to propose to Carol, and Carol's like, can we talk about this? He's like, oh, God. It's like, what an idiot.
That is a good one.
Michael's birthday episode in season 2 where
he's terrible.
He's terrible because Kevin's afraid he might have skin cancer. And again, Michael feels like Kevin's stealing his day. And he just says the dumbest crap. I hate that one. And then Date Mike.
You know what? This is so crazy. I thought about all of these.
Yeah. So Date Mike is they go to like this Dave and Buster's type of place where they have food and bar food and pool tables. And Michael doesn't. First of all, he's like a 6-year-old. Like he doesn't get to go to those places because nobody isn't any friends. So he's there with his work group and he's like, he walks in and he's like, oh my gosh, we're not here for a work party. He's like, we're just here hanging out. I got invited. Like he's just geeking out about like a little kid. And then Jim's like, hey, you want to go play with us? And he doesn't realize that this other woman, their friend, is there.
Jim and Pam bring a friend, hoping that
set him up.
They'll hit it off.
They'll hit him up. And once he realizes that, he has to run out to his car like a moron, put on this backwards like, I don't even know what you would call that hat. What is that hat called? It's like a backwards.
It's a cap of
It's like a newsboys like looking hat, but it's on backwards.
It's like a Puma hat, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's really stupid.
It looks stupid on him.
Yeah, it looks ridiculous. But anyway, so he's like,
I'm Date Mike.
Nice to meet me. And he like puts his collar outside of his coat and he starts acting like a jackass.
Then he starts acting like a jackass.
He starts like doing the little John Travolta strut in Grease and he starts hitting the pool ball where it hits off the table and just being a complete Michael.
All of these were in the running for me. That's crazy.
Yeah, so you can't have a podcast episode about The Office and not talk about cringy Michael.
Yeah,
moments.
because that, like I said, it's one of the barriers to people who just are so turned off by it in the beginning. But you gotta stick it out. Believe it or not, you will love Michael Scott.
You will learn to love him,
and your heart will break for him over and over when you see those very human moments. Because he is a good person.
He is. He's well intentioned.
Very well intentioned.
But he can just be bizarre, socially bizarre. But I will say, having said all that, we both know because we listen to the podcasts, the other Office podcasts, he is one of the most well-liked, loved, respected people in the entire industry. Like everybody loves Steve Carell.
I think Steve Carell is he's probably one of the most underrated actors in our generation.
Yeah, they said he's absolutely a joy to be around, to work with.
He's so good. If you've ever seen him in anything else where he plays like a dramatic role.
Yeah.
Dan in real life. Like he's just, his range.
Yeah.
Is incredible.
But they just said he was very pleasurable to be around. He was always good to the crew, and he made sure everybody was always taken care of and got there early. I mean, he didn't
act like the diva.
Yeah, he apparently was just the man. He was kind of like the standard of what you'd want somebody to be in that industry.
To lead the cast.
Yeah, so real quick.
I had an honorable mention.
Okay, hit me with it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I had 6 of those. Well, I was looking at my notes wrong.
Girl! Hit me. Let's go.
Okay, so I had when he kisses Oscar.
Oh, my Lord.
So
my Lord.
Poor Oscar is forced to come out.
Yeah, he's outed without his approval.
So he's outed because Michael's a dork
Yeah.
and can't handle himself. And he starts to cry in a conference room meeting. I'm sorry I called you faggot. Yeah. And then Oscar insults him. That's when he starts to cry. And then let's hug turns into
Oscar feels bad because Michael's going to stomp off like a child.
I want you to remember this moment. And he goes to, and I don't know how Oscar does not break character.
Well, they said Oscar does not, like Oscar Nunez as an actor did not break character very much at all.
I still remember a couple of the moments where they said that he did break.
Yeah, it was very few though.
Very few.
Yeah, he was very, very professional.
So that was really cringe when he kisses Oscar. And then
I wasn't planning on sharing that part of my life with you today.
Today has been so backwards.
Yeah.
The way Michael acts when Charles Minor takes over.
Oh, that was going to be one of mine.
That's really uncomfortable for me.
It is.
First of all, he's acting this way up against Idris Elba, who I've been saying for years, and no one's listening, he needs to be the next James Bond. I mean, this guy...
Dude's a rock star.
He just has that aura, that James Bond aura. Put the dude in a tux and...
He's got it.
Watch
Whatever
the magic.
it is, he's got it.
Whatever it is, he's got it. And so to see him such a big presence to see him in this office setting, and then to see him up again, like he almost makes Michael's normal behavior look even worse.
He does. He does a great job of that.
But he acts like a child, and like when he's imitating him, when he's repeating after him.
Oh, that was on my.
Is that the one where Pam says, like, when he goes like full on 5-year-old kindergartner?
Yeah, she goes, he passed the Jim Carrey talking butt stage. She goes, this is bad.
This is bad.
Yeah, he starts repeating him like an idiot.
And then he tries to like get out of it, but I'm just joking around.
And you can hear Ed Helms in the background. He goes, dude, stop. I love Ed Helms.
I know.
Which, spoiler, we're going to get there. But
here we go. Okay, my sixth one. The entire episode is cringe. The dinner party.
Oh, my good Lord. So I talk about that later in segment 2. But
So Jan and Michael, now Jim and Pam have been dodging this invitation to dinner forever. Michael has to ultimately trick them into accepting the invitation, but it's just Jan and Michael have such a dysfunctional relationship, and they're being so passive aggressive toward each other. I'm in hell, and they're laughing, but they're serious. And and Jim says at one point they're playing a game. They're competing against each other to see who can make their dinner guests more uncomfortable. But yeah, that whole episode to me is cringe.
Agreed. Okay, Mary Beth. Well, we have a couple more pieces that we want to cover before break. Do you want to hold on those and talk through those after break?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
let's do that then.
Okay. We're going to take a break. Remember to text us when you're on our website. You can look above the show notes, and there is a link. Send us a text. We'd love to hear from you. You can also email us at thebestofgenx@gmail.com. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the early days of Jim and Pam and that love triangle with Roy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Dwight. We're going to talk about the merger and all sorts of other things.
Let's do it.
And we're back.
We are back. And Mary Beth, like you mentioned earlier, we are going to kick off our second segment with the early days of Jim and Pam and Roy, the love triangle. Did we like how it was portrayed? What say you, Mary Beth?
I mean, what do you mean by that? That's a loaded question for me.
Well, I guess, did you enjoy that storyline? Did you think it was played well? Do you think it was written well? Do you think it ended and kind of just sort of flowed the way you feel like it should have?
I do, because when I look at the show as a whole, and I look at Pam especially, who she is at the beginning and versus who she is at the end, I think the way that they did that was so important to her character in particular. She had a lot to learn about herself, and I think that experience was the catalyst for her evolution as a character. And it was agonizing to watch, obviously, because they're in love. He knows he's in love with her. She doesn't realize she's really in love with him. And so it's hard to watch, but that's what you love about it, right? There's always that will they, won't they in every show. There's that tension. And I don't feel like they prolonged it any longer than they needed to. I don't feel like they had to drag it out. Because it took 3 full seasons for them to finally admit their feelings, same time, same circumstances to each other. I liked it, but it was frustrating as a woman to watch her go through that.
And on my end, it was frustrating as a man to watch Jim love somebody and be so close to somebody and know that person connects with you on a different level, and then watch another man, try to be intimate with a woman that is yours.
That's such a sickening.
Not yours, like
Sure.
meant to be yours in life. And
everybody can relate to that. It's just a sickening feeling.
Yeah, even when like if I was younger and there was a girl that I liked, but I saw a guy dating her, it was tough.
Yeah.
And, I thought Dave Dimon did really well. There were some parts that you're like, if you're pro Jim, you're like, man, shut up, Roy. Like, get out of there, Roy. You kind of had those moments. But I think for the most part, he played it pretty well. I think the only unrealistic thing that I didn't like was the whole, Roy goes up to Jim in the warehouse. He's like, hey, I heard you had a crush on Pam. And, hey, I'm just glad she has somebody to talk to, that's not realistic. I promise you.
You don't think?
With a guy like Roy, I promise you, a big Hulk, fantasy football kind of dude, that dude is like way overprotective, way territorial.
Well, he gets to that.
I'm just saying, like, that as a dude, that's not realistic. A dude is not watching or knowing that somebody has a crush on your, or had a crush on your fiance, and you're good with that because she has somebody to talk to. That does not happen. So I didn't like that part because I'm like, come on, that's not realistic.
I don't want to believe that every guy that most guys are like that.
It's pretty natural, to be honest with you.
Well, jealousy is natural.
Yeah.
I don't know. I buy it because of who Roy was. He didn't care about her.
Right.
He thought that he did.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I mean, he clearly takes their relationship for granted.
Absolutely. 100%.
But she allows him to be that way.
Yes.
And so he continues to be that way.
Exactly. Like, if you keep getting what you've always got, you're going to continue to get what you... how's that saying go? Oh, I've just messed it up.
No, I knew where you were going, but it's like the definition of insanity.
If you continue to do what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got.
Yeah. But I thought they did a good job of, like, Jim finding little moments where he took, like, little subtle jabs at Roy to Pam.
Right. And they went right over her head.
Yeah, I liked that part.
Like, well, I don't like to bother Roy with this kind of stuff.
I mean, like your thoughts and your feelings.
Yeah. That's
what
I
Roy
mean.
think about
Like,
that?
Pam had a lot to learn about herself. And one thing I will say about that particular part of the series, I think that you cannot, and this is true for any human being, you cannot grow, you cannot evolve unless you're ready to be honest with yourself. It's one thing to not be able to be honest with the people around you, but when you can't be honest with even yourself, you cannot grow. You simply cannot.
Yeah,
you are stunted. And Pam was stunted by that relationship because she couldn't admit to herself that all those years she'd invested in that relationship were wasted on someone who...
That's hard to come to grips with.
It is very, very hard. It's very hard to do, and that's one of the reasons I love Pam at the end so much, that she is able to articulate that and gives that message to younger women. Like, but we won't get there yet. We'll save that. But yeah, that's probably my favorite part of that early seasons. Jim and Pam's kind of romantic tension, and the fact that she has a lot to learn about herself.
Yeah, and I really do like how Greg Daniels set it up to where they weren't together because she was with Roy, but they were close enough to where Jim, played by John Krasinski, was comfortable enough to be in the break room with her when there was kind of like that little, I don't know if it was a montage, but you could see Roy in the background when she was trying to talk to him about potentially going to art school or whatever, and you could see Roy being like, no, being that guy. And then Jim is, then it pulls to Jim in the break room with Pam, and he said, you got to take a chance sometime, Pam. Like, I love that they portrayed how they were close enough and they had that connection enough where he could say that to her and not be like, not be worried. He just said it to her. Like, come on, Pam. And like, you're better than that.
Tons of moments like that where we're able to see just how deeply he loves her.
Yeah.
With the teapot.
Exactly.
I mean, just all these tiny, beautiful moments that you really get to see played out, near the end of the series, a sort of collection of all those moments. They're so beautiful.
Exactly.
And I think it's kind of a meme, actually, with Office fans. Jim and Pam are relationship goals.
Oh, yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah.
So I feel like, to our point earlier, Greg Daniels did a masterful job of doing exactly what he told Ricky Gervais and Steve Merchant. This is a love story, and I think he just really built that up. Yeah,
and what's cool also is that I love the fact that she calls off the wedding, but then they don't immediately get back together.
Right.
Because she still has some growing to do.
Exactly.
And I love
that was all well done. I think we both agree that it was well done. And just kind of to wrap that up, and I know you've heard this in the Office Ladies podcast, but from an audition perspective, it was John Krasinski met Jenna Fisher in the audition process. worked together, for the on-screen stuff to see if there was chemistry there. And they both separately, without knowing that the other did it, went to the show crew or went to the main, folks at the show and said,
when they were hired.
yeah, John Krasinski's like, hey, is Jenna Fisher going to be Pam? And Jenna Fisher's like, is John Krasinski? Because he needs to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's really neat and says something about
It really does.
how that translates it into on the screen.
Yes, it absolutely translates the chemistry that they had together.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Well, I'm glad we talked through that. So next, the orderly and pragmatic Dwight K. Schrute. Why was he so important to the show, Mary Beth?
Someone had to represent, I think, the passion that he had for the company. There had to be someone there.
Very well said.
Who bled Dunder Mifflin.
Never took sick days.
His devotion
worked
was
on holidays.
Unparalleled. Not almost, but to a crazy degree, absurd degree, his devotion. There's nothing he wouldn't have done for that company. And there are moments throughout the series where that is part of the payoff. The things that the lengths he's willing to go. For example, what he did for Angela in taking the whatever document
it was like the final year tax forms that he had to take to New York City for her because she forgot.
So he shows up late, and then Ed Helms' character Andy is sort of calling him out behind his back to Michael, and so it's one of those things where Michael has that light bulb moment, like, I've been manipulated by this new guy, and I realize how important Dwight is to, he was like, Andy punched a hole in the wall. That's how much, this company means to him. I don't know. Dwight is so incredibly special because we had to have someone who loved the company so much that we were rooting for to lead it.
Yeah. Amen. I think you, as usual, very well said.
And also, he's a born leader.
Yes.
He's just misplaced for so long, it seems.
And I always feel like Michael knows he needs Dwight, but he doesn't want to portray that he needs him. But that dude needs that guy.
Yes.
You
and
know,
that's another.
You know what I mean?
Yes, because at the beginning, Dwight is that nuisance. He's the one Jim always picks on. And even Michael, for much of the early part of the series, is irritated by him.
Right.
And doesn't take him seriously. But if you look closely, and we've seen the show so many times we can't even count it. It's like the more I watch the show, the more I see Dwight's brilliance from the start. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I say he's a natural leader and just has to figure out how to deal with people.
Right.
Like, he's a natural leader, but he has a tendency to go authoritarian.
He's very Machiavellian.
Yes.
He's cynical, he's strategic, he's calculating.
Yes. And so I think as he lets these people into his heart, that's when his natural abilities really shine. Yeah,
in later episodes, we'll talk about how he does let people into his heart. He starts developing personal feelings for these people, like interpersonal relationships. He changes in that respect.
Yes, because they go from subordinates to...
Exactly. But at the beginning, he is clearly subclinically sadistic. I mean, he's he enjoys when others are humiliated. He thrives on that.
And he's very textbook.
Very textbook.
This person did this, fire him.
He's a volunteer sheriff's deputy, for God's sake. So he is just very by the book. Yeah. What an amazing character. It's kind of like Sheldon with Big Bang. It's like, that's
he
what
realizes
keeps me.
You watch Dwight's life kind of fall apart in some ways. As he lets people in, his life gets messy, and he's not a messy life person.
Exactly.
Everything's in order. Everything has its place. Everything has its purpose. Every person has a place and purpose. And so life gets messier, but also more beautiful.
Yeah. Well said again. I know you don't like sports analogies, but in sports terms, you think about most valuable player, MVP. To me, I don't watch that show if Dwight's not on there. Like, his character is the reason that brings me back to that show over and over.
I'm feeling you, man.
So he's the MVP in my book,
And I feel
that's
like
why he's so important.
I feel like that's something for me that happened. It happened pretty quickly, but it happened over time. Each time I watched it, I loved him more and more and more.
Exactly.
To now, to me, I watch for Dwight.
Exactly. Truth. And as I understand it, he actually read for Michael Scott. But then they realized when he came in, they're like, yeah, that dude's Dwight. And I think
he read for Jim as well.
I think so. There were several that read for multiple, but Patton Oswalt was one that read for Dwight. Jude Friedlander. There was a couple more, but it's like you said about Stanley Hudson. It's like I couldn't picture anybody else being Dwight except for Rainn Wilson.
And when you have any experience with casting, you get that.
Exactly.
There's something you can't put your finger on when someone comes in and is right for the part. And it's often very arbitrary.
Is that je ne sais quoi, or what is that? Is that something?
Well, I don't know, but it
just fit.
Something fits where, you see people who are just as talented. It's nothing like that. And maybe they even fit the part physically, but there's some quality that's so subtle.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think one of his first starts was in that show 6 Feet Under in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001. So I didn't realize that until after I started watching The Office. I'm like, oh yeah, that was him. So he is actually, Mary Beth, fun fact, he's the only character who appears and has dialogue in every episode.
I wondered about that. Yeah.
So that's how important that guy is to the show. Okay. Any more on Dwight? Our man Dwight Kurt Schrute?
I'm sure we'll have more to say.
We will. Okay. So eventually, Scranton and the Stanford branch merge. Okay? Drama. So we didn't really get into the fact that Jim transfers to Stanford because he's got to get away. He
decides he has no future there.
He's got to get away from the Pam Roy kind of triangle deal.
It's too hurtful.
It's hurtful. So he does go to Stanford. So that's when we get introduced to characters like Andy Bernard, the Nard Dog. And Rashida Jones's character,
Karen
Filippelli. Karen Filippelli.
Filippelli, please leave me the message.
Yeah. So we get some episodes where they're just at Stanford, and so that you have to kind of introduce that, how that connects to the show. Which I heard that they had filmed the Stanford scenes in like the warehouse part of the set, so that was kind of cool. They basically built like a Stanford section of that warehouse. So anyway, eventually those branches merge, and so you bring in Karen Filippelli, you start bringing in Andy Bernard, and that's where the show really kind of just ramps up a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
It starts changing a little bit.
It starts to hit a stride.
It does. You start getting some momentum, I think, for the people that struggled to get to that point in the show. Once they got to that if you got to that point in the show, I think you were good.
Yeah.
Because Ed Helms just brought a really cool flavor to the show, I think, with his Andy Bernard character. It's this trust fund kind of kid that went to Cornell, and his family's really rich, and I think they paid for some buildings at the university, and so, part of the foundation. So he's kind of got that bow tie,
What does Zach Wood say? At least I don't dress like my life is one long brunch.
Right, exactly. Like garden party-ish. So yeah, I loved his character. I love Ed Helms in general. I know you and I have talked about recently one of his podcasts that he has out there, but I love Ed Helms. And I thought the kind of the back and forth with him and Dwight was brilliant, and it really kept me energized into watching more of the show. So.
Well, what I think is interesting is once you get to the end of the series, did you ever have to remind yourself that he wasn't in from the beginning?
That I struggle with that because I'm like, dude, just been there since day one, but he hasn't.
But it
right?
felt
like he did.
That's how like good he is. In the show.
So yeah, essentially the Stanford branch closes. Their branch manager moves on to, I think, Staples or Sharper Image or something like that. He goes up to a competitor, a national competitor.
So
I think it was Staples.
The purpose, though, of course, is to get Jim back.
Yes.
So that plot line gets Jim back to Scranton and having to face Pam, but this time he's seeing someone, and it's Rashida Jones' character. So that I guess continues the tension, the romantic tension between them, because there are still feelings there, but neither one of them are willing to admit it to each other at that point.
Yep. So agreed.
So now we have Pam who's hurting because she's seeing him with someone else, and so it's flip flopped.
Yeah, she struggles with that quite a bit.
Yeah, but she needed it, and I love that.
Yep.
part of it so much.
Yeah. So, had to throw that in there because that kind of, like I said, kind of changed the trajectory of the show. What about Mary Beth? Okay, so I would love to hear your personal journey of The Office, just as a fan. Like, how did it start for you? Did somebody refer you to the show, or did you just stumble upon it and said, I'm just going to give it a shot?
Okay, so I had a student named Ryan who was a huge fan, and I want to say this must have been class of 2006, 7, 8, something like that. He had me grant him access to the building. I met him up there, I think on a Saturday. He wanted to borrow some cameras. And I was like, what's this all about? And he was a great kid, so I was not going to say no to this kid. And he wanted to film a birthday video surprise for his girlfriend, and it was all based on The Office. So he wrote his own little Office sketch and wanted to film it and use the school and the offices and things like that. So usually it's a student's enthusiasm that gets me interested in something. And then in 2009, class of 2009, maybe he was that class too, there were a group of students who were so obsessed with it, who would never shut up about it, who constantly, that's what she said, they were so into it and so funny themselves that I was laughing at them just talking about it. So that's what finally made me give it a shot. However, it took me 3 tries. So the first time, 2 episodes as far as I got. The second time, this was maybe a year later, I got, again, 3rd episode, I'm like, I can't with this guy.
So I was going to ask, was it the cringe, the pace, the content?
It was cringe, I think, coupled with the fact that was the first, like documentary style filming.
It's different.
So there was no like laugh track. There was no audience. There was no, that energy was not there. And I was like, I can't handle the fact that he's cringy. And then we have literal crickets. Like there's nothing to break that tension. And I was not used to the camera being essentially another character.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So
like the fourth wall or whatever.
So it amplified the cringe. The fact that there was no laughter in the background. No one was laughing with him. And no one was even laughing at him. It was just awkward moments that seemed like could happen to anyone at any time.
That was my point earlier. You had friends that had like laugh tracks and stuff, and that's what we were used to, but we didn't have that.
This is the first style. And so when a character does or says something as cringy as Michael Scott does and says, you need the other characters around him to call him out immediately, and there'd be a big ruckus, and you need to hear audience. And I couldn't handle it. It made it super cringe, right? And then finally, I think it was after 2009 is when I finally got past that point. And Mallory went away with her dad for like spring break or something, and I binged the entire series in less than a week because I was by myself. And I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life when I finally...
So you actually watched it as it was 2009, so that was like season 5 or 4? So you actually started watching it then? Is that what you're saying?
It must have been, I would say, okay,
so maybe... you're an OG.
Maybe it was 2010 by the time
but still, that was before the show was over. My experience is going to be different.
I do remember the finale, but see, I feel like it was already, maybe it took me longer. Okay, so maybe I gave it a try in 2009 because these kids were like so obsessed with it.
And then you stopped.
Then I stopped. So I went a long time in between each try. So by the 3rd try, I was able to binge the whole thing.
Okay.
So probably 2012.
Okay.
Just as it ended.
Right.
And once I hit the basketball episode, I was in. And there
was a good one.
And there was no going back.
Right, that was a good one. Well, I have to thank you for my journey because you're the whole reason I started watching it. So
you're welcome, man.
If you hadn't just stuck with it, I probably would have never watched it. I'm sure maybe I would have. I don't know, but you're very influential about stuff like that because you get very passionate.
Yes, I am.
You get very bubbly. So I think we were like at a Christmas thing, family Christmas thing. You're like, dude.
I wouldn't shut up about it.
Yeah, and you were like, why have you not watched all of it? And you and Josh just started like playing off each other and like quoting it. I'm like, I had no frame of reference. You kept talking about Dwight. I'm like, okay. Finally, I tried it. Similar to you, it took me 2 or 3 cracks to get going. And for me, it was just the pace. I was just bored. I thought it was kind of slow.
Right, because you had to get used to the camera being that other character and the camera catching things that you were supposed to
Right.
catch. Little glances, little tiny moments that we just weren't, as a viewer, we weren't
Yeah.
conditioned
Yeah.
to watch it.
So for me, it was like 2 or 3 episodes. I'd stop. 3 weeks later, I was like, well, I got to start it back over because I'm not going to start on. So I would start it all the way back over. 3 or 4 episodes, I'd stop. So I could never get past like that first season, which the first season's only like 6 episodes.
Right, it's very short.
So I think you actually told me, you go, dude, just get to the second season.
That's what I said, yeah.
And I was like, okay. And finally one day I gave it a chance and I never looked back. And that was during COVID. So I was in.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it was that recently.
Yes, it was the last few years. So like I, just like everybody else, I was in lockdown mode and I'm like, okay, this is Mary Beth's shot to prove me right or wrong, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got to the second, and once I got to the Dundies episode, I was done. That was it. I mean, I was like, this is amazing.
Damn, then you really have been on a constant loop because in just 4 years,
I've probably watched it 40 times.
You know it as much as I do. And
I just became fanatical about the show.
Fanatical.
Love it. I have T-shirts. I have Dunder Mifflin T-shirts. I have a tumbler that's shrink wrapped. That's got all the different, themes of the show and tropes and the stapler and Jello. I've got all that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. And it's a show that we can't walk away from.
Yeah, for God's sakes, I have a Dwight Schrute's Jim for Muscles T-shirt that I got on Amazon. So I'm all in.
So we had similar, I guess, experiences, and I'm just so glad that you finally took my advice and just stuck with it because you will reach a moment. Anyone out there who's not watched it, you will reach a moment where there's no going back, and you will be so glad.
Yeah, it's like comfort food for me, but it's a show.
Yes, I love to have it just on the background.
It's just I need it. But anyway, so I'm glad we shared that, and thank you for sticking with it so I can get on it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So next we want to talk about the evolution of Michael and Holly. So this is Holly Flax, again, played by Amy Ryan. This is Michael's eventual wife and lover and life partner and soulmate. It's an interesting kind of evolution, I think. I can give you my take first this time.
Okay.
So Holly Flax's character, I think, comes in season 5, right?
So
Toby, there's the Goodbye Toby episode.
I think that's the end of season 4.
Could be. So it's right around then. But basically, Toby decides to go to Costa Rica, and Michael is just like freaking over the moon about this dude leaving just because of the dynamic that they had against each other.
But he's not excited to have a fill-in HR because he hates HR.
At first, he's like, this is going to be another Toby situation, and he basically like just doesn't want to even think about this person being involved in his day-to-day at the office. And she comes in and makes some type of like funny remark or something.
She wins him over.
Yeah, she wins him over because of her personality and her sense of humor. And like
instantly.
Yeah, she basically takes a jab at Toby with Michael, and he's like, "Oh, okay, you can call me Michael." Like
you can see he sort of does this very subtle double take.
Yeah,
like the light bulb goes on in his head. Like she's different, and also she's luminous.
He fell in love with her in like 20 seconds.
Exactly.
So that's
and not in the normal Michael Scott fall in love in 20 seconds. Like this was real, and you knew it.
Yeah. So he falls head over heels for Holly Flax. So she's got like a little bit part there for several episodes, and then she eventually has to go back to Nashua branch.
They separate them.
Yeah, and I think in New Hampshire, so that's where she was from. So it separates them. But what was so funny, I thought Steve Carell was amazing in this, was how he falls in love with her right away, and he goes up to Jim, and he's so excited. And Jim's just like, "Hey, there you go, laying the groundwork." Then he says something way over the top that doesn't.
Her butt refuses to quit.
And Jim's like, "Well, I tried." He's like.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, Jim's going, hey, like, look at me, because Michael couldn't even focus on Jim's face. So
I like what Jim says. He says, now you can think those things, but you can't say those things.
Right. So basically, Michael's just like going over the top and like way too soon. Like when he proposed to Carol after date 3 or 4, he's like wanting to tell Holly that he loves her after knowing her for an hour.
Yeah.
So I think John Krasinski as Jim did a great job with that. And it's an interesting thing to follow. We'll get more into it. Do you have anything else on that one?
Well, just that she, from a viewer standpoint, we knew she was the one.
Oh, she complimented him
We
perfectly.
knew she was the one right away.
Yeah, they could do like Yoda jokes and old SNLs.
They geeked out on all the same things.
Yeah, so Michael would act like John Lovitz in SNL, and she would repeat him, and they would just.
And she was just as awkward.
She was the female version of Michael Scott.
Exactly.
Essentially, so it worked really, really well.
And it was so hard to see them separated. And I really love how they saw each other in the next season at the company picnic, and she's with someone else, and he's like, you can see the growth that his character is experienced, because he says, one day we'll have a good story to tell.
That'll be our story. Yeah.
So he's not rushing it, and that's a new Michael.
That's growth. Yeah, you're right. I never even thought about that, but
Yeah.
you're right.
I love that moment. That's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, so he eventually has to take her back to Nashua and help her move back. And he was originally going to...
They were going to do long distance.
Yeah, they were going to do long distance. He was going to go there every Friday or whatever. And it was 7 or 8 hours. So it just wasn't going to work. She cries on the way there. And so he finally, I think, comes to the grips with, it's not going to work right now. But he still has hope. And it's a good progression. And
I love their characters together are so funny.
yeah.
And to see someone care about him, truly care about him. With Jan, it was, Michael, I like you, love you, hate you, despite everything about you. And Holly is, I love you, everything about you.
Yeah, with Jan,
everything about you, just the way you are.
With Jan, there was no true admiration for Michael.
No, she hated. I mean, she admitted to him that I'm self-destructing, and maybe you're part of that. Maybe I need to lower my expectations and just date you. And it's like,
it was like some weird.
He's like, she's basically saying, I love you in spite of everything that you are.
Yeah, it was like some weird exercise. Like, let's try it after this therapy session. Like, just see how this goes.
Yeah, and so, but Holly loves him for who he is.
Yeah, she admired him and respected him, and
that was fun.
Yeah, agreed. So, okay, so let's get into some fun stuff.
Here we go.
The least favorite storyline prior to Michael's departure from the show.
I'll go first.
Okay.
This was a little difficult because I kind of dig all the storylines, really. But there are seasons.
Yeah, I just had two.
And I don't mean like whole seasons,
Sure.
but I mean seasons in these people's lives.
Yeah.
I'm never a fan of the Michael Scott Paper Company.
That's one of mine.
I
promise we didn't plan these.
And I just chose one.
I just had two.
So the Michael Scott Paper Company, it's only a few episodes, like it doesn't drag on, but it's so hard to see Michael lose his shit, and to see his life sort of crumble.
Yeah,
and it's hard to see Pam break away. It's hard to see them struggle, knowing you can't trust Ryan. It's like this team of, I don't know. It's not a dream team.
No, by no means.
It's just hard. It's just hard to see them struggle for those few
Agreed.
episodes. But once again, any part where it veers off for me, the payoff is always there.
Oh, yeah.
Payoff is always there.
Yeah, we all win in the end as a viewer.
And so the Michael Scott Paper Company leads to yet another moment. And there are, I think the whole series is sprinkled with moments where you see what a kick-ass person Michael Scott is and what a kick-ass businessman he is.
Dude can sell.
Dude can sell, and he can lead when he,
He's what we call a gamer. You know what I mean? Like, he shows up when the time is right, when
all the
really,
chips
really
are down.
needed him.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we get that beautiful payoff moment in negotiations with David Wallace when he says, your most profitable branch is bleeding. So I don't think I have to wait out what does he say? I don't have to wait out Dunder Mifflin.
I think I just have to wait out you.
I think I just have to wait out you.
Because he's threatening him that the stakeholders, the shareholders are not going to.
And it's a chills moment.
Yeah.
Because Michael is very good at what he does.
He knows that losing, profit going down and losing branches, that's not going to look good on the shareholders, and he knows that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And he admits his tenacity. It's like, it doesn't matter because it's not about money to me; it's about people.
Yeah.
And
he's like, if this goes under, I'll just start one the next day and the next
another,
day, and another.
So just that little period is difficult for me to watch things fall apart, but they do ultimately pay off.
I had that on mine as well.
Okay.
So
and it also changes the trajectory of Pam's career as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm just saying, when it gets to that point in the series, I'm like, let's just hurry up. Just get through this.
Yeah, I know, because it's a struggle.
Yeah. So that was one I had. But then the Donna storyline, so it goes back to the date Mike.
I thought about that.
I just didn't like that storyline.
I thought about that, but the only reason that I changed my mind was I love the way the other characters behave about it.
Yeah, that's true.
So I like Jim and Pam, and I like Pam becomes very maternal mean, now that she's a mom by that point, and her relationship with Michael has evolved, and she's trying to help him rather than just ignore him and hope he'll shut up or whatever.
Yeah, so basically we mentioned earlier the Date Mike episode where it was cringy, but they're at this Dave and Buster's type place, and it's the bar/restaurant manager, and her name's Donna, and she's kind of busty and somewhat attractive, I guess, but Michael starts striking up a conversation with her. They talk about being a manager at different places, and so they kind of link up that way. And then she comes to the office, which I just think is kind of a weird episode. To me, the episode just didn't seem like it fit. She comes in there to try to buy a printer or something to that effect, and she's there almost half the day. And
printer sales are usually done over the phone, Miss Boob Shirt.
Yeah, so but like Jim and Pam are involved in it, and I think it just kind of drags on. It's kind of boring to me, but I just didn't like that storyline. Plus, she's married.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, Michael's like hooking up with a married chick, and I don't like that part either.
Well, yeah.
Now, he does the right thing in the end.
Well, and he hates himself. He just can't admit it.
So I just don't like how that kind of materialized, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he like, of course, cringy Mike, he's trying to kiss her in his office, and he's kind of like trying to play it off like he's trying to talk to her about something else, but he's like leaning in.
Well, he's getting these cues from her. And the other people, half of the office is saying she's not into you. The other half is saying, yeah, I think she is. And so he's being his awkward self.
It was so. I didn't like that storyline at all. I could have done without that.
I don't mind it.
Okay, so we obviously want to talk about the least favorite storylines, but let's get into some fun stuff. Let's end it with on a high note. Okay.
Okay.
Your top 3 favorite episodes of season 1 through 7.
Very tough.
Very, very tough. We've already mentioned a couple.
This was my order. So my third was Benihana Christmas.
Amazing.
There's something about that episode that I really love. It's funny because Michael is forlorn. Carol has just broken up with him for very good reason. And so they're celebrating Christmas, and you have the dynamic between Karen Filippelli and Pam kind of teaming up against Angela, and then
they're having competing parties in the office.
Competing parties, and
Christmas
it's fun.
parties.
There's karaoke, and they go to Benihana for lunch, and
because Andy Bernard, Ed Helms, says, "I can't stand to see you in pain, man."
Yeah,
he's like, "Let me take you to lunch."
And so it just ends up in this Christmas episode, and then another thing, they bring 2 Asian waitresses, I guess, back to the party, and he can't tell them apart, so he marks. He marks one
like
with
forearm.
the marker. It's hysterical to me. I've always loved that episode.
Okay, what do you think I didn't like about that part?
That he marked her?
About the Asian waitresses coming back.
Okay, I'll tell you what I don't like. Okay. They're different.
They're different.
So at the restaurant, they're flirting with 2 very specific waitresses.
Right.
They show up
with 2 very different
with 2 completely different waitresses.
Yeah, I was like, what?
And
what?
I don't know if that's because they had too much sake.
Yeah, I was like, what just happened? What just happened? I feel like there's like a backstory to that, but it's like got cut out or something.
My second one, beach games.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Where Michael's trying to find a replacement for him.
Yeah.
Which he thinks he's getting the corporate job, and he doesn't.
So he's created this series of games to find out who the real leaders are. But for me, it's my favorite because it's the moment where Pam finally has the strength to speak her piece.
Yeah, she pulls a Mary Beth.
She pulls a Mary Beth. Why do you say that?
Just because you're kind of that way. You're like, listen, I ain't going to sugarcoat it. This is what it is. Like, this is how I feel. Like, you're that way.
Honesty is important, and Pam had to learn how to stand up for herself and to be assertive. One of my favorite moments of the whole show, but I chose the whole episode, is when you see them around the campfire. Michael's talking to them, and he's talking nonsense, of course. And in the background, you see Pam trying to muster up the courage to do the coal walk that no one else was willing to do except for Dwight, and he almost killed himself.
Sure.
But to watch her in that moment where just before she does it, she does that quick look to the side, to the camera, like, and takes that deep breath. And it gives me chills every time I see it. And it makes me so happy to see the joy on her face and the disbelief and joy at the same time that she did it. And she looks at the camera and just like, and she takes that adrenaline and rushes down and says to everybody, well, I won't give it away if you haven't seen it, but it's a pinnacle moment for her.
Yeah, I'm with you.
In that journey that she had been on for a whole season or more. And it makes me so happy.
What do you think my favorite line in that whole episode is?
Whole episode?
Oh, yeah. There's one legendary line. You ready?
It's something about sliding down your gullet.
No, you ready? If Michael organizes some type of group hug, stand next to me.
Okay,
The Dwight Schrute line.
My favorite line is Andy Bernard floating away in the sumo wrestler outfit, going, "Look at what I'm doing, and go tell somebody it."
If Michael organizes some type of group hug, he goes, stand next to me. I die every time I hear him say that.
It's such a great episode.
And it was like his facial expression when he did it. It was so funny.
It's a great episode.
Was
but
that
it's
two?
a turning point. That was my 2.
Okay.
It's a turning point for Pam. And for Jim, too. So, and then my favorite episode of the first 7 seasons is Jim and Pam's wedding.
Oh,
which is a 2-parter.
The Niagara.
Very good.
That's cool. Okay, well, I didn't rank mine, but I can easily rank them. The Golden Ticket episode, I think, is kind of a fun episode.
It is fun.
So Michael does some kind of like, what would you call that? Like a
Willy Wonka.
Yeah, like he
Razzle dazzle.
Yeah, so one of his clients is going to get a golden ticket, and they get some kind of prize or discount or something to that effect. And Michael dresses up as Willy Wonka, and then he thinks that David Wallace is pissed at him for this idea because they gave too many, like almost all of them to one client.
By accident.
By accident. And it was kind of like a warehouse kind of shipping thing. And David Wallace, he thinks is mad. Then David Wallace figures out.
Well, he was at first.
He was at first, but then he realizes that the leaders at the corporate level love the idea.
No, what happened was this company that received all the tickets was so
That's what it was.
happy.
That's what it was.
They decided that Dunder Mifflin's going to be our premier provider
That's
for
what
all
it-
of our
yep.
office supplies. So,
Nope.
so what looked like a huge profit loss because of this mistake ended up being a huge win.
Love it. Yeah, you're right. So he's trying to get Dwight to fall on the sword because he thinks David is pissed. And so Dwight's like, not going to happen. And so when David realizes that the
It was a
company
good
liked
thing.
it, then he gave Dwight the credit because that's what Michael
Michael
did.
cannot handle that.
Michael can't handle it. He's like, David, can I be in this meeting? And Dave's like, no. And the
sneaks
freaking Jim,
Oh my God, yes.
he goes, let's face it, this is for Wonka fans only. He's never seen the movie. I die when he says that.
Andy's cheese cart. You quote that all the time.
Yeah.
So he sneaks him in on the cheese cart in that meeting so you
Yeah.
can listen in. Just silly.
Yeah, so I like that episode. I think
That's a
it's
good
fun. And then number 2 is Goodbye, Toby.
Yeah. Goodbye, Toby.
I mean, yeah, think about all that's going on in that episode. You have kind of the carnival kind of vibe on the outside. Michael is so jazzed. He's singing a song. You got fireworks. You got Andy proposing to Angela. There's a lot of...
And Jim planning to propose.
But the Nard dog stole his thunder.
Stole his thunder on a whim.
Yeah, so there's just a lot going on in that episode that I think is cool and fun.
And through all of it, Michael is completely oblivious to everything Holly's dropping.
Right.
Holly is flirting with him. She is sending the message, I want to spend time
Right.
with you.
She's like,
and
man, I'd
Michael,
like some dessert and go off campus. And he's like, oh, here's a great place. And he
he's
like leaves her to go
used-
do it.
He's so used to rejection that he's not seeing any of her cues at all.
Right. But then she touched his arm and he got real excited. And oh, yeah, I just think there was a lot going on in that episode that was fun. And then the dinner party. I love that episode so much. You mentioned it earlier. It's fantastic.
It's cringe for me,
It's
but I do
cringy.
enjoy it.
The acting is amazing. Yeah, I can't say enough about that episode.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And pay attention next time you see that. They say the word babe.
How many times?
I mean, I didn't count, but it's like 16 or 18 times. Like they don't in the show, the couples never really called each other babe, but that episode they must have made a conscious decision.
Well, because it was passive aggressive all the way.
Right. So like
They ended all their passive aggressive statements with babe, trying to make it sound and feel better than it was.
But then even at the end when Jim and Pam go and
They're making fun of
eat
it.
at this little burger shack, they're making fun of it and saying, I'm like, wow, I didn't.
You know what, babe?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's they're
babe-
making fun of them for all their
Yeah, so-
crazy behavior.
Yeah. So on the internet, the dinner party is usually rated as one of the top, episodes, and it certainly rings true for me. Okay, so let's wrap it up with our top 3 favorite moments, not just
Now,
episodes,
God.
of season 1 through 7. Again, difficult.
Episodes was hard enough.
Yeah.
Moments, even more difficult. Okay, my third casino night
Mm-hmm.
where Jim confesses to Pam that he's in love with her.
Okay.
One of my favorite moments. I love too that they filmed that completely hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So even John and Jenna didn't know where the cameras were. They
Yep.
wanted that moment to be as authentic and natural feeling as possible. And boy, did that pay off because it's so tender
It's a big one.
and
It's kind of what everybody was waiting for.
yeah, and they are so they make it look so easy. You feel like you are spying on people at one of the most vulnerable private moments where he is putting himself completely on the line.
Yep.
And that's a scary thing to do. And man, it's a good moment. My number 2 is this probably should be my number 1 because damn, it will never get old to me. The cold open with Dwight's fire drill.
That's your number 2?
That's my number 2.
I thought that was going to be your number 1.
Maybe it should be.
In my head, I'm thinking that's her number 1.
But it was hard to pick, like, are these my favorite moments because of the heart or the laugh?
What's the procedure?
Yeah. Use the surge of fear and adrenaline to sharpen your decision making.
That was one of the quotes you and Josh would say at the Christmas thing, and I had no idea what you were talking about.
I think I may have shown you the clip.
You probably did.
It was, the fire drill is so damn funny, and it's so long for a cold open, and you see every character shine.
Yeah.
You see the nuance
It was
of every
chaotic
character.
and how they function in that
You
chaos.
see Kevin go and break into the snack machines. You see Michael being everything you'd expect, every man for himself.
Yeah.
You see Jim and Dwight, well, not Dwight, but Jim and Andy, you see them being the real leaders that they are, trying to get people out.
He's like, I'm not going down like this.
I'm not going out like this.
Yeah.
And then to see Angela screaming in chaos and the cats coming through the ceiling, just so damn. And then Stanley's heart attack.
I knew you loved that one. That had to be difficult to film too, by the way.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine. And then my favorite moment from seasons 1 through 7 was the moment in the job interview where he opens the door and interrupts Pam's talking head and asks her out on a date.
Oh man, that's a really good one.
Oh my God,
it's just a really cool.
That is one of the coolest moments of the entire
Like
series.
we finally got here.
When he's driving back from that interview, and she's at the same time having this talking head where she had, see, Joe, I don't know if it's just a guy girl thing, but for a girl to have what I call stupid girl disease for so long, and to go on the journey she had to go on, and to watch Jim with someone else, and to have her own heart broken, and to develop strength and a spine and going after what you want. This is someone who couldn't do that. She had to come to the moment where she said to herself and meant it, I'm okay. Everything is going to be okay. We had to see Pam get to that moment. And that's when he opens the door and says, are you free for dinner tonight? And she's like, yes. That's when it had to happen. It wouldn't have worked had it happened any sooner.
Perfecto. It was great.
Yes.
No, it's a good call. Nice tender moment that you picked.
It is. It gives me chills. It makes me
didn't pick a tender
cry.
moment.
It never gets old.
Okay, so my number 3 was the same, Casino Night Confession.
Oh.
Yeah. My number 2 was the roast of Michael Scott.
Oh, that's another cringe for me.
I know. I love it, though. I think it's so funny. Like, Pam was up there and was like talking about his, like, referencing his penis size. And he said, how big was it? Or how small was it? If it was an iPod, it'd be a shuffle. I mean, I died. And then you can just see his, like, demeanor change when he's like, yeah, I don't like this so much.
He had the wrong idea.
Yeah, I thought this was the right idea at first, but I'm getting made fun of too much and I don't like that. So he's getting, like, sensitive and he's getting hurt. And he starts like tearing up and he just walks away.
Yeah, because there's real contempt behind all of this.
Oh yeah, it's like they're like, okay, let's go. Go. Oscar's like, I'm gonna let him have it. And he's like, I don't tell you how to make sausage made. He just gets weird about it. But then he comes back and tries to redeem himself by roasting others. And,
you are the reason I drink.
Yeah. Okay, and then Fire Drill. I picked Fire Drill number 1.
Hey.
I mean, and it's just a cold open.
It's just the cold open, man.
Yeah, but like you said, it kind of went on for a little bit, and you
get to see every
it was so action-packed.
character. You get to see every character respond.
Yeah,
to this
because usually you just see them kind of stationary in their workstations. You know, whether it's the bullpen or the annex or at the reception desk. And this is like, okay, they're going into action.
It's
like,
a life or
it's
death
an emergency.
Life or death
How do they
emergency,
react?
and you get to see every character respond to it in the most perfect way that their character would.
Yep.
And because of that, it's absolutely hysterical. And I got to say, I can remember watching the show all the way through for the very first time. And I remember the moments that made me laugh so hard. I was in pain, Joe. I was in pain. And that is the top. Like, had me laughing so hard, I couldn't breathe. My stomach was hurting just Just golden television. And I must have watched it 5 or 6 times. I laughed so damn hard. That was one of them.
That certainly was part of the reason it piqued my interest to even watch it.
A couple of others that it'll have to come in our second part. But there are a couple others that made me laugh until I absolutely was in pain.
Yeah, I'm anxious for the back half of the part 2. So
me too.
Well, that was fun.
Hey, it's always fun to talk about.
I feel like we could have talked for hours.
We could have kept going, and we probably should have been more responsible in our structuring of this because we just could have gone on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And on. And I don't know what the listeners will think. Will people ignore the episode of our podcast if they haven't seen The Office? Will they enjoy it if they have seen The Office? Did we cover enough ground? Did we cover too much?
Who knows?
Who knows?
The jury is out. Yeah, so join us next time when we talk through season 8 and 9 after Michael's departure from the show and kind of...
You think it's over.
But
over. Baby, it just keeps getting better.
It keeps getting better. There's so many different twists and turns and things you wouldn't expect.
And the heart,
and people you wouldn't expect.
The heart. It just, the show, the love,
Chef's kiss.
It is. It's perfection all the way until the finale.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening to another piece of the Gen X experience worth saving. This conversation, our love letter to the Michael Scott era of The Office, has now been immortalized in the annals of history. If you like what you heard, subscribe to the Best of Gen X wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. Joe, always a pleasure.
Duh.